Welcome to the CEO Project Podcast, where Jim Schleckser, author of the best-selling book, Great CEOs Are Lazy, and the founder of the CEO Project, provides ideas and tools to help CEOs of mid to large-sized companies grow and optimize their businesses. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everybody, to the CEO Project. Well, that's the first time I got to say that. I think I told you at the last podcast, which was our 100th, that we were going to change the name from the Lazy CEO Podcast to the CEO Project Podcast. So that's done. All of our graphics are different, and I've got to remember to say it the right way. So if I say it wrong, you can send me a note, and I'll owe you a free copy of my book. But today we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic. I've in my book, I talk about the idea that there are multiple hats that the CEO needs to wear that are high leverage, one of them being the engineer hat. And this is about processes and systems that allow the business to scale. Unfortunately, it's kind of profoundly an unsexy area, but it turns out it's the secret sauce to allowing your business to grow. And our guest today is Bradley Hamner. Bradley started his first business in 2009 with, like most of us, no customers, no leads, no nothing, a little bit of money in the bank and hoping I'd be successful, which he was. He did over time figure out that he was working in the business and busting his butt and not getting the results he wanted. And that caused him to create a system, an architecture, if you will, is the word he uses. We would call it just a process and system, but that's okay, to allow the business to scale and maybe use a little less of his time. So now Bradley's a business growth coach, a certified value builder, and a host of Above the Business podcast, which is like work on the business, not in the business. That's what he's going for there. He has entrepreneurs and business owners come and talk to him and about their business needs. So anyway, this is going to be a real deep conversation on processes and systems and how you build scalability in your business and a bunch about what Bradley's built with regard to that. So Bradley, welcome.
Jim, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much. And congrats on 100 episodes and congrats on the rebrand of your podcast.
Well, thanks. Yeah. We got feedback from listeners like a lazy CEO. I mean, the book is called The Lazy CEO. Or what? Great CEOs Are Lazy is the name of the book. And the first book I wrote. And like, unless you know about the book, you don't get it, right? And I'm not sure I aspire to be lazy. And so it just didn't work. But, we're all a project, right? So we're all working on ourselves, and that feels like it's a better fit.
I love that. I love the messaging and positioning there. I think it's great. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, and you said over 400. So fellow podcaster, congratulations. I've had some people say, I'd pay you to shut up, actually, as opposed to pay you to talk. So,
yeah, I feel that one too.
Yeah, right. Ouch. So tell us a little bit about how you came to the idea of the power of processes in your business first, and then I want to kind of go down a journey that maybe will end at kind of what you do now. But how did you say? What was it? The blinding flash that said this ain't working?
Well, it's pain. I mean, for most of us, it's born out of pain and frustration. I mean, to the point to where I thought I was going to leave entrepreneurship and go back into the corporate world. I had a short stint out of college in corporate world, and my dad's a small business owner. He's actually a farmer. He's in the agriculture business. Mm-hmm. And so when when you're the son of a farmer, you understand what it means to work hard. I mean, I just picked that up and caught it from my dad. I wasn't like taught hard work. I just watched what he did. And so I carried that into my business. And look, I mean, if you're going to start a business, I mean, you have to understand what it means to work your tail off. And that's exactly what I did initially. And that was what was needed to get lift into that first business. But about 5 years into it, I mean, I simply ran out of time. I started to experience, I didn't realize at the time, but I started to experience panic attacks. A tremendous amount of stress because I was just working all the time. Mm-hmm. And what I think is important is because it was working. And so whenever something is working, then you just continue to do that. And the business had grown. And as Goldsmith says, what got you here is not going to get you there. But I didn't really know kind of what to change. And so I ended up going and seeing a cardiologist one day after working out, because I actually went and saw an internist, and then he sent me to a cardiologist. But it wasn't immediately obvious what I needed to change. It wasn't an epiphany moment of, oh, I need to go back and, I got to change things and I got to make it systems and processes. It wasn't that at all. It was actually a few months later. I was in Toronto, and I was actually a strategic coach, which
Yeah.
probably many of your listeners are
Love
familiar
the
with.
work he does there.
Yeah, I think Dan's work is great. And so I'm actually in the wrong class, scheduling wise. And so I was actually in the 10X program,
Yeah.
and 10X is easier than 2X. That concept had just come out. Now it's obviously portrayed in the book,
Yep.
but we're doing that exercise, Jim. And the guy I'm sitting next to, it was kind of in an adjacent industry. And he said, well, last year we did 40 million and I made 5 million personally. So here's what 400 million and 50 would look like. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, look, it's just systems and processes. And like many of your listeners, I'd heard that for years. That wasn't a new thing. We you read E-Myth, love Gerber's work. You hear
Yep.
those kind of things. You go to conferences, you listen to podcasts, read books. You start to hear that over and over and over again. And I scoffed at him and said, I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. Everybody says that, and nobody ever shares with me what it actually looks like. And he
Mm.
said, well, at lunch, I'll show you. And he did. And from that point on, the biggest thing that changed initially on the flight back wasn't that I pulled up Word and started to try to like actually build systems. It wasn't that. It was the identity shift of, wait a minute, I'm not the doer of all the things in the business. I need to make the shift of, I need to be the designer. And so
Hmm.
obviously I didn't have the language that we have around now with it, but the identity shift inside of me is the biggest thing that changed. And then everything that came from that is a byproduct of ultimately that chance encounter.
Interesting. So, I love the fact that you actually saw somebody who had executed it and had that view, and that was I hope you give him credit in your book,
Yeah.
and everything you do, right? Because that was an important person in your life.
Oh, it's a huge important person. As a matter of fact, I've actually recently contacted strategic coach, and we're trying to track him down because I actually want to have him on my podcast. And because if to him it would be just a side conversation that he wouldn't even think anything about, but for me it was transformative.
I've had people come to me and say that, hey, when we were together 6 months ago and you said this, that changed how I viewed my business and where I spent my time. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
What did I say again? I mean, I don't even remember what I said to them, but sometimes it just those things drop on your at the right time, at the right place. They penetrate your skull and then they change the way you think. I mean, it's just
I
crazy.
want to say something on that. Jim, you and I obviously are just now getting to know each other, but just to that point, when I started, so ultimately I grew businesses. So the first time that I ended up actually doing any sort of coaching consulting was late 2017. So I never had this desire of going and doing this. I kind of fell into it. But anyway, back to the point. I think that as a coach, consultant, advisor, whatever you want to label you, whatever term you want to use, I think it is incredibly important the responsibility that you have when you speak into somebody else's business and their ultimately their life. The ripple effect that has on their life, their family, their business, their team, your customers, the future customers. I mean, it can have a massive ripple effect.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And I take those things and words that I use now incredibly seriously because it's a tremendous responsibility that I I think that some people just use very flippantly and just throw things out there without realizing that it can have a transformative in a positive way, as this guy's impact did, and at the same time, it can be detrimental at times.
Absolutely. We have a mission at the CEO Project of positively impacting 1 million lives. So we actually keep track of, not just our clients and our members, but all of the people that work for them, because we take exactly that point. If we do a great job with the CEO, most research will tell you that the outcome of the business is 40% dependent on the quality of the CEO.
Mm.
So big deal, that one person, and positive performance there affects everybody in the company. So we're actually, through our work, affecting literally at this point almost 400,000 people that we positively impact on a regular basis. So I
Well,
totally hear you on that.
I
So
love that.
once you said, okay, system, got it, or whatever words you had in your brain, because you didn't quite have the words at the time. There are a bunch of systems out there, right? There's
Hmm.
Gazelle scaling up, there's EOS, there's
Hmm.
4DX. I mean, there's a
Yep.
bunch of them. Those are some of
Yep.
the more popular ones. Why? Did you look at those, and what were your reactions to the various alternatives that were already built and available on how you run a business?
That's a great question. I know all of them. I actually was for a short period of time an EOS implementer. They've changed the way
Yeah.
that that program is. So I know EOS incredibly well.
Okay. A lot of
And
the people we work with use it, by the way. It's pretty popular. It
Oh, it's
is.
great. Scaling up is great. The 40X folks, Jim has been on my podcast. And so I think that in different ways, I think, and this is my opinion, I think that those operating systems or the way of doing things have or appeal to certain size businesses a little bit more than others. So as an example, the businesses that I work with are very small, $300,000 in annual revenue, at
Oh, okay.
least
We're way down there.
up to about 3 to 5 million.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
and admittedly, pretty much all of our clients are mostly at a million at least, but in
Yep.
that $1 to $5 million range.
Yep. Yep.
Well, when you do that, Jim, you start to adapt and pick things from EOS and try to adopt them to your business, but they don't work. And so it's like, I don't have a leadership team. I have like an office manager, right?
Yeah.
I have an
Right.
EA. Is my EA on my leadership team? And so you start to kind of like look at some of these things and it starts to kind of break apart. And so that's number one. Number two is the way that you kind of, at least if you hire an EOS implementer, you do it on a quarterly pulsing. Well, I love quarterly planning. It's a big part of what we do and advocate and actually run for our clients week 13 of every quarter. However, it's sometimes not enough. Like it's not enough depending on the side of the business. Sometimes
Yep.
they need more 2 to 3 times a month to be around community of other people to actually move things forward and actually have some accountability. So there were some of those things. So that before I knew it, I started kind of like breaking it apart. And to their credit, Gino and what they've done at EOS, they said, "Hey, look, we want you to coach." I mean, this is not to me personally. This is to everybody. They want you to coach those kind of things pure, meaning like don't water it down. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't agree with some of these things for some of these
Well,
clients. It's
more
not
than
working
that,
out.
they're selling an off the rack suit, and you've got people with different size bodies coming to you, and you're like, that
100%,
suit doesn't work with that person.
100%, 100%. No
So
question
you have
about
to
it.
tailor it, right? You have to modify it.
No question about it.
And
Yep.
I understand why they don't want it modified, but I love the fact that you said I've got to do something different because I love elements of you, but not like how do you do a level 10 meeting when there's two people in the meeting, right? I
I
mean,
mean, come on, it's just not gonna work. I mean, listen, a good friend of mine actually, or I shouldn't say friend, acquaintance in Huntsville, Alabama, Greg Crabtree, wrote the cash component of scaling up, and he's in Huntsville. And I've played golf with Greg several times at our home club here in Huntsville, so I know Greg, I know scaling up and the methodologies, and so listen, I say that because to suggest that all of the things that we have are just super unique and no, absolutely, we give credit and acknowledgement to certain places where I've learned it or anecdotally had in my own experience. And so I think that's really important. And look, I mean, a lot of the best ideas are passed down from others.
absolutely. People ask us when they're thinking about an operating system, they go, I think I need an operating system. Which one's the best one? And the answer is anyone is better than nothing. So just pick it and use it, and you'll be better than you would be if you didn't have a system. So we're just huge fans of a system, almost any system, frankly.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And look, there are a couple unique things that we can get into if you want to get this granular about some of the things that we do that I do think are a little unique because of the businesses that we
Yeah.
serve in that area based on the number of team members and that sort of thing. So if they're in that like minimum 2 to like 30 team member range, like we really know that space
Yep.
pretty well of like what it takes to be able to grow a team to that size and the experiences you have with your first level of managers. I mean, think about that. Those businesses have hired their first manager, They have their first level manager. So they're having to learn not only how to be a leader to people, but how to then lead other leaders. And that's a totally unique, like new skill for them to learn in their small business journey. But I think you said something really important that I want to double tap on, which is if you pick one, you have to stick to it.
That's
And
it.
so the tendency is, oh, scaling up is the way. That's what we're going to do. And then somebody says, "Have you read Traction?" And then you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I think we're going to switch." And then you end up going to 40x or something like that. And so then it's constantly changing versus like this is the way we do things.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Funny. So maybe you could just give us the big chunky bits of what you've developed. Again, it's for smaller. I think most of the people listening will probably be a bit larger. So you might, when you kind of give the big, like major elements of what you do, give us a little like, why wouldn't this work? The big small comparison, if you
Yeah,
will, as you talk about them. So give us the arc
totally.
of what you do
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, for sure. And I know not everybody's going to be able to see this,
Ah,
but we actually with our members, this is what we give our members. And so this is I guess an award that we call the Rainmaker to Architect Journey Award. And these are little milestones that slide out here. And
yep.
so with our members, there's five. We use the word scale. I mean, what business owner doesn't want to scale,
So
regardless
you
of
the memnomic is scale and there has five. Oh, that took you a while to come up with. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
And then
that
you've
that
got
that
you got your creepy Masonic symbol at the bottom. Okay, got it.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I'll put that in there in a second. But anyway, so yeah, we use scale as an acronym. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go over and because I actually do have a couple things because I have a couple members that are well north of 3 million that I can talk to about and how some of this may
Sure.
adopt. And so what
Go
I'd
for
like to
it. So
do
we're
is
going to
go
go
over
through
these five
scale.
milestones.
Give it to us. Love it.
Cool. So obviously we use scale as an acronym. So the first thing is sustainable revenue. And so for a small business owner, getting to $1 million in top line is a huge milestone to hit. But if you're at 1 million, then what does it look like to get to 3? But if you're already north of that, I like to look at what do you need to do to get from 3 to 10? Or if you're
Yep.
at 10, what does it look like to get to 30? So
Hmm.
those are the frameworks and the steps that we look at. So I'll sometimes say 3 to 1, 1 to 3, 3 to 10, 10 to 30, so on and so forth. Okay.
Got it.
So the first thing is you just go through what does it actually look like at this level? So regardless of where the business is now, doing an exercise to say, what does the business look like at 3 million? And I'm talking about doing it on a journal, writing it down, and actually saying, what does business look like? What's my role? What's the team organizational structure look like? What are the things that this would allow me to start doing? What would this allow me to stop doing? Okay,
Right.
so that's number one with scale is sustainable revenue. Number two, consistent growth and profitability. I mean, literally, I don't care what level you're at, every business wants to continue to grow and be profitable. And we use, Jim, I'm sure you're familiar with this, we use the rule of 40 as the
Say that
as the
again.
metric. What's that?
What do you use? The rule of 40. So
Rule of
2020.
40, rule of 40. So your year over year revenue growth plus your profitability, we want that number to be 40
Got it.
or
Yeah.
higher.
Yep.
Pretty much everyone we work with are bootstrapped, so they're not taking in outside investment. So they have to balance
Yeah.
the year over year growth and profitability. And introducing that concept to business owners helps them to understand that growth doesn't equal profit, growth eats profit. So how are
Yep.
you going to balance going into 2025 your profitability and your growth rate? So that's number two. So we got a business doing at least 1 million, 3 million, or 10 million, whatever that looks like for you. Number two, it's growing and profitable. Number three, we have ample time away from the business. Now, I love that. I love that Strategic Coach has a concept called free days.
Yep.
We do not adopt to that concept. What I think is more important for the business owner is that he or she chooses what is your definition of a day off look like? What's your
Okay.
definition? Number one. And then number two, do you track it? As with anything, revenue, profit, sales, whatever it is in the business, if you track it and measure it, it will improve. And most business owners, myself included for years, never actually tracked how many days off I took in a year.
Yep.
So number one, we have sustainable revenue. Number two, consistent growth and profitability. Number three, enough time away. Number four, we have leverage. And leverage comes in two forms. At the lowest level with small businesses, you have to have an executive assistant minimum. Like before you even hire a manager, you have to have an EA so you can buy back your time. And then at the higher levels, that obviously comes in forms of not just having EA, but obviously senior leadership and other managers to help you to do. Obviously, Jim, you would speak to this very well, given what you talk about, the things that actually the CEO should be doing that you
Mhm.
love and that actually grow the business. And so I think that's a really perfect tie with for what you talk about. And then number three is I believe that you have to have efficient operations. And that's obviously where the operating system comes into play. So the business has to run off of something other than you. If you are the center of gravity of the business and it's constantly pulling on you, then it's going to wear you out and it's not going to be able to really scale because we don't have our systems and processes documented. So that's our scale framework, and those are the
Yeah.
milestones that we specifically focus on with our members to help them to become the architect of their business.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, we could go for 10 hours on this, I guarantee you, because there's so many overlaps to what we talk about. To start with revenue, we spend a lot of time on the quality of the revenue, right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Recurring revenue, margin, low capital intensity, some other factors like that
I
when you
love that.
design your business in a particular way, because people don't think about recurrence, right? You got a construction business and I did $10 million and in January 1st, I'm at zero and I got to go find $10 million again. Recurrence really, really helps you grow a business, frankly. So,
No, I love that.
um, yeah, so I love an awful lot of what you talked about there, in terms of trying to grow a business. When you think about, and even more when you talk about, processes, one of the we used to I would there were two questions I would ask when we were interviewing CEOs. One was, how many hours a week do you work? And they go 80 sometimes, which they weren't particularly good at their job.
Hmm.
And the follow-up question to that was, so if you double the company, how many hours do you think you'll have to work?
Mm.
And they go, well, that would be 100. Oh, geez. Right. So, it makes it really clear you need a different answer because your current model is not scalable to the next size of business. So
Yeah, I love that.
something really has to change inside that. We also talk about point of constraint in the book, and when we
Mm.
deal with and with other CEOs, and one of the points of constraints is how the CEO engages in the business, which is what you really talk about with your last one. If it's all dependent on you, we got a
Yeah.
problem. So the question we used to ask is, so if you went on vacation for 2 weeks, what would happen to the business?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the really, really good ones go, they barely notice I wasn't there.
Mm.
They'd run fine. I got lots of great people. They know what they're doing. The systems are defined. It would grow, probably maybe not quite as fast. The the middle answer is, well, it wouldn't go forward, but it'd probably still be there when I got back, right? And the worst answer, and you probably run into some people running businesses where they go, I'm not sure what would be left when I came back at the end of 2 weeks, right?
Oh, it is. And that's exactly why institutionalizing decision making outside of you, having a framework for that. And then also to your point, for a lot of people, they can't take a 3 day weekend, right? A Saturday, Sunday, and a Monday on a Labor Day, Memorial Day, or something like that stresses them out,
Yeah,
right? To think,
yeah.
well, or if it's a forced holiday, maybe that's the only time they actually feel like that they can actually take some time off from the business. So I totally agree with that. And so, having, a 7 day test, a 14-day test, even a 30-day vacation test, can you actually take some of that time off? I actually had a member, we were actually
I
one of our
wasn't trying to
retreats
give them a heart
recently.
attack, Bradley. 30
What's
days.
that?
Some people would literally have a heart attack on the phone if I said, you're away for 30 days. What happens? Right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And to that point, actually, we had a member that said, last year, his name's Tom, he's in Colorado. He said, I took 2 weeks off, but it was interesting. I had two customers that when the team took the call and they said, hey, I want to talk to Tom, they said, well, he's going to be out. Well, when's he going to be back? And they said, well, he's going to be back in like 10 days. And they said, okay, well, have him call me back.
Oof.
He said, this year, talking about this next 12 months, he said, I think that if I take 30 days, they're not going to wait that long. They're not going to
Ah,
wait that long. And I was like, that's great. That's great for him to have that observation that, oh, wait a minute, I actually need to get to a place to where people are not going to wait around and say, okay, well, I'll wait for 2 or 3 days for Jim to call me back. No, I'm actually going to have to get the answer from someone else.
that's great. I used to, when I traveled, this is when cell phones were a little less available. I would always appoint a DJ, a designated Jim, and I would
That's
rotate it
good.
around. I'd rotate it around my team, and I'd literally say, Phil's the DJ, right? Everybody knew what it meant, right? And what that meant is, if there was a problem, Phil's in charge.
Mm.
And it was great because I'd come back and they go, oh, by the way, we solved this problem, that problem, and it's all set. I'm like, and it was awesome. And I would rotate it, right? So different exec team members would be the DJ over time. And when they didn't know the answer, they'd huddle up and they'd figure it out. It was profound in terms of growing the competency and confidence of the team. So you feel free to steal it if anybody actually has a team that you're working with. When you're out, just designate somebody, right? And let them.
I think that's great. I think that's a great insight. Where did that come from for you? Was that was that something that born out of necessity, or like did somebody share that
Um,
with you? I'm curious where those kind of things
no,
come
I
from.
think I'm gonna have to trademark it. I think I've never read it anywhere. I think I just came up with it. Like, I'm gonna be gone. They can't get a hold of me because cell phones were not as available in those days. Somebody's got to be in charge. And I viewed it as a developmental opportunity for the people working for me. So this will actually cause them to stretch. They're in charge. They've got to own it. They can't play this sit in the back seat thing anymore.
Yeah.
They're in charge. Funny, just to finish that, I would usually say, by the way, just don't burn the plant down. We had a manufacturing plant. I called in one time. The guy was the DJ. Hey, Bob, how's it going? He goes, it was a small fire and we put it out really quickly. I said, that's good news. So anyway.
No, I'm sure you've heard this analogy before, but speaking about fires, is that I think that as the entrepreneur, we like to be to feel like that we have a role in the organization.
Mm.
And so some of the times we go around and we'll kind of put out a fire and put out a fire and put out a fire, but we just don't sometimes realize that we're actually better arsonists.
Well, we'd say that. What happens to a firefighter when there aren't any fires? They become an arsonist and they go
They
set
become an
them.
arsonist. Yeah.
How do you deal with the ego issue? Because one of the things we see is when somebody gets such ego gratification after being a great problem solver, and you say you're not going to solve the problems anymore, you got to let your team do that. There's an ego check for them of, well, who am I and what do I do then? How do you help them with that, Bradley?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the straightforward answer, the first thing that popped in my head whenever you asked me that question was community. And here's what I mean by that.
Mm,
When you're around other peers that are trying to do the exact same thing, and this is important. I don't think everybody has the right to know your story. And here's what I mean by that. As a business owner, we deal with a lot of things, both good and bad. We have celebrations. We hit 10 million. I made $1 million personally. Um, uh, I was just able to buy this car, have this house. There's not very many places that you're able to celebrate the big wins and also very openly and vulnerably share the things that you're struggling with that if somebody is not a peer to you would not understand.
yeah.
And so what I think is to answer a question around the ego, I agree with that. But there is something about when you're in a room, whether it is Zoom virtual room or in person with people, and the barriers begin to come down. And I think that takes a little bit of time, right?
Yep.
You can't microwave some of that community. But I think that you start to realize, oh, okay, wait a minute. I'm actually not alone in this. That's exactly how I was feeling with that with my very first managers. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, what are you paying your man? Oh, good. That's what I'm paying. And these things start to happen. And even things where, people lean over and say, So what do you pay yourself W-2? Okay, great. Now, what was your profit last year? Did you distribute all of that to you? And so
Mhm.
then these barriers of the ego start to come down because you start to realize that other people are dealing with the same things, both excitingly and at the same time the frustrations. I'm in like a men's small group, not a business owner group, and I was half of that group happens to be small business owners and the other half doesn't. And
Mm.
I ended up kind of casually throwing some language around this about a year and a half ago, and somebody who's not a small business owner, like, kind of came back at me a little bit. And then I was just like, oh gosh, what am I doing? I should not have talked about that, because I got to realize the crowd that I'm in, that's just, they don't have the context of that. And so if you're an entrepreneur, regardless of the level of the business that you're at, if you get around other people, I think it really does have this tampering effect to the ego.
Yeah. We obviously we agree with that because we do build CEO peer groups and CEO advisory boards. And, when you get amongst a group of people that are dealing with what you are, who have no agenda except to help you, um, it's profound. It's very hard to find, and it's profound. And you can have those conversations. I had a CEO I talked to the other day, and he goes, he had a tax thing that happened, and he was going to owe, I don't know, $700,000 in income tax because of a change in the tax law. And we talked about it, and he goes, all his buddies are hunting, fishing, motorcycle buddies. None of them have any understanding of what's going on in his life. He's like, thank God I have this because I don't know who I could even talk to about it.
Totally.
Nobody would
Yeah.
understand it. They'd think I was from Pluto, right? So,
No question about it. It does. It becomes, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, the responsibility that you carry to be able to speak into his life and talk
yeah.
about that, and not to brush that aside and say, well, man, what a great problem to have,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it is a class A problem, but it's still a problem.
No, for sure. But I mean, other people that have been there have been able to understand and recognize that, for sure. And then they can see that. And but then, with that, they also don't see the other side of that coin too, which is sometimes the pressures and the demands and the people and the families that business represents, that he has the ability to impact.
Well, and not the least of which is when things don't go well, he gets paid last. So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
he can take a zero home one year if things don't work out so well, or a negative
100%.
number. So hey, Bradley, we heard sort of your target, early single digit was sort of perfect for you. Any industry, I assume?
Yeah, in the industry, we did that by design, because I think that for myself, being around other business owners, serving other business owners has been the absolute best thing. So for me, I personally have equity in 5 different companies in 5 totally different industries right now, and the learnings that you get across those industries, incredibly important. It really
No,
is.
no doubt. We see that all the time. So if somebody wanted to engage with you and have you help them out, what would be the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first thing, connect with me on LinkedIn. For me personally, is probably the best way for them to connect. Secondly, is they can go to our website, blueprintos.com/assets, blueprintos.com/assets. We put a number of different things on there that they can get some free access to. So love to connect with people.
Cool. We love free stuff. Thank you for that. Well, Bradley, this was fascinating. Like I said, I had to hold back because I didn't even get into values and so forth as part of your your processes and systems as part of your decision-making strategy, but maybe we'll do that another time. But this is really great. I wish you good luck. I think we need more systemization of what we're doing as business owners, and you're helping do that. So good stuff. And thanks
Awesome.
for taking the time.
Great. Well,
Um,
congrats again on 100, and congrats on the rebrand. I really enjoyed being with you.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. This was the inaugural CEO Project podcast. You can tell all your friends you saw it or heard it. And I hope you join us next week on the CEO Project podcast. Thanks for coming. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas,
concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com.
Thanks for listening to the CEO Project Podcast. We'll see you next time. Be sure to subscribe to get all the future episodes and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.